It's Wednesday, and I'm Kanan Chandran, and welcome to the WED Web Chat, our regular series of discussions on things that are topical and current. Today's session is about living in this city. I was born here, grew up here, and Singapore has gone through a lot of changes. But the one thing that strikes me when somebody asked me this question a few weeks ago was the sheer convenience of being in Singapore. Everything's accessible. You get quick access to food. You can get into work easily enough. Now there's good connectivity, be it Wi-Fi or public transportation. So it's quite easy to navigate this place. But it all comes at a cost, of course. Things are not cheap. Things are expensive. Housing is expensive. Your cars are, well, exorbitant. You pay $100,000 for a piece of paper, electronic paper that says you can then go and buy a car. The future in Singapore seems to be associated with the big dollar sign. It's a place that keeps up with the trends and tries to stay ahead and is always looking to punch above its weight. But can it? If you look at some figures, the SOS reported 476 suicides in Singapore in 2022. Now that's 26% higher than the year before, and it's one of the highest in more than 20 years. The issues are family problems, employment and financial difficulties, and romantic relationships. So that's a challenging aspect. How are we coping with mental health as jobs are lost, new industries are born, and change is the only constant? Today, we were supposed to have 4 panelists, but one hasn't shown up. So maybe he might pop in later. But we have on hand Richard Hoon, who's a board chairman, an independent director and mentor and advisor to C-suite executives. He has worked in various industries and with brands like Tourism Victoria, American Express, International SOS, before he started his own firm, iSearch Worldwide. And he is very active in charity and community work. Welcome, Tracy Tang, who's co-founder of Production 55. She has been in the design and media industry for 12 years. Her company is a holistic production house with offices in Singapore and Philippines. And she's joining in from the USA. We've got Pamela Sng, CEO and founder of Need a Planner Events. She has over 18 years of experience planning corporate, luxury, and lifestyle events. And she also dabbles in tech and innovation projects. Let me start with you, Richard. What are the biggest changes you've experienced living in Singapore?
Okay, I think maybe compared to Tracy and Pamela, I live a little longer than you guys. So I've seen Singapore gone from a third world city to a first world in the period of 50, 60 years. So the transformation of Singapore is quite spectacular. I mean, I used to grow up in a kampong, and water is a hole in the ground. A latrine is another hole in the ground lower, and there's no electricity, there's no refrigeration, no nothing. And life was still eventful and quite fun then. And of course, today we have all the modern sanitation and all the convenience of a city that is thriving. And yet there's a lot of unhappiness and loneliness among the people. So I would categorize as this. I think in Singapore, if you are well-to-do and sufficiently rich, you'll be thriving in the city. But if you are middle income, then you are struggling in the city. And if you are poor, you are barely surviving in the city. So I think if we cover different strata of society, then we have a better glimpse. So I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. But we need both the rich, the middle income, and the poor live in the city. And how do we be aware as a society and bring everybody along? I think that is crucial. And my wish is that Singapore will not be just a rich and thriving city, but will be a gracious city. And that needs people-to-people help. And that's my ethos and my desire to help the underprivileged. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, you're so right, Richard. It's all about people at the end of the day, right? We have to connect. We have to be able to work together, live together. But it's increasingly difficult because of the tech division, technology, and the divide that's causing, and also the income disparity that's also quite evident of late. And the fact that COVID kicked in didn't help very much because a lot of businesses suffered and a lot of people were stuck and now have to try and catch up. Right. Okay. Pamela, how about yourself? You haven't lived as long as Richard or I, but what are the biggest changes that you've experienced in Singapore?
For me, essentially, so not that young, not that old, but being born in the 80s, you know, you were sort of like that sandwich generation. So I've seen, you know, coming from an HDB flat where we didn't have air conditioning, where we had squatting toilets, you know, and then now there's this whole almost materialistic drive that, you know, you should be living in a condo, or you should be living with a pool, you should have air conditioning, you should have Netflix, cable TV. You know, do I feel that we've definitely gone towards being a little bit more of a materialistic culture, for sure. You know, but then also there is a lot of need that if you are not especially because of the pandemic, if you are not savvy with tech and, you know, being able to log into Zoom or, you know, and stuff like that, you almost end up very disconnected. What's happened now is just that you know, it's either you be adaptable to change, to survive and to be relevant. And if you don't, you just get left behind. And, you know, I think that's a real reality for everyone right now. So yeah, that's my point of view.
Okay. Yeah. Tracy, do you feel the same way as well? I mean, you know, the constant chase after the material as well as whatever else is out there.
I actually do have to agree with Pamela in this aspect as well. I think especially for our generation, like she mentioned, we are the sandwich generation. So being in between both, you know, being the kids that were the ones that used to play outside a lot more because we didn't have those digital screens and so on, and seeing the effect that it's having on the current generation and not knowing where to side, I suppose. I think that's kind of where we are at right now as a nation. Like, do we cater more to the older people? Do we cater more to the younger people? We're kind of in between, and, you know, both sides kind of tell us that, you know, you're too young to know anything, but the younger generation tells us you're too old to know anything. So in this sense, I think that that's where we actually would struggle quite a bit. Yeah.
What's the reason of this, for the struggle? Is it because you want somebody else to conform to your thinking, or are you having difficulty trying to understand what other generations are trying to do, or why they're not doing it right as you would want them to do it?
I don't think it's necessarily talking about whether we're right or wrong. It's really just a generational issue, so to speak, because say, for example, when we're talking about disciplining children, the way that we would deal with that in the past as compared to how we would deal with it now, given that we are more educated and more well-informed, it would actually set a precedence for like saying like, oh, you know, say, for example, I was caned as a child and I grew up totally fine. This is something that you hear a lot from our generation and the older generation. But if you try telling someone who's younger or someone who's foreign that, the more likely response you get is, oh my God, you were abused.
Yeah, the horror. Like growing up Asian, we were like, you know, you do something wrong, your parents are like, choose your weapon, the cane, the broom, you know. And then like, yeah, sharing this with foreign friends, Westerners, and they're like, oh my God, are you okay? You need therapy, you know?
Yes, Richard, you're the only one with children in this panel.
Yeah, my
was
children is as old as Tracy and Pamela. So
them up.
I hope I'm speaking on their behalf as well as mine. Of course, I think the discipline issue is no longer tolerable today, the way we allow it. But you know, I'm old school, so you know, don't you know, I'm going to be quite different. I still believe that spare the rod and spoil the child, and that is so true. And the child needs to be disciplined. It's just the extent of it. So as parents, as you know, I'm involved in a parenting organization. is how to discipline without anger. How to discipline the child and still maintain your dignity and your focus. It is when you mix anger into the discipline that you lose that control, and the kids do not respect you because they don't understand the lesson. They just understand the discipline. And so that's my take. I don't believe in everything that we do in the West that is abuse. It's not abuse if you do it within a certain context of it, and you don't have to be very hard. My late wife and I used to use a spatula, to discipline our kid, not a cane or a stick, but a spatula. So a spatula is a little bit broad, so when you hit, it's not so painful. And we hit on the hand. We hit on the open hand, and we give it a hard whack so that they can feel the pain. And then we tell them the reason why they did it, especially if they do something that they use their extremities in causing that, or they push the sister or something like that. So we use that. And so once we did that once with one kid, and then we hang the spatula up, and every time we have to do is just to threaten, are you ready for that one? And then they'll stop. The second and third one will stop as well. So it has helped us in our family, but every family, every father and mother have to find their own way of disciplining their child. But to discipline is absolutely necessary because the child doesn't know. And then discipline also causes boundaries, because a kid will always push their boundaries continually. And they see that if you don't have boundaries, actually you don't love them. You just keep on pushing. And when you put the boundaries, they may not like it, but they know the limit of where they're going, and they feel safe in those boundaries. It's very unusual for younger kids. Not for all of you, of course, it's for younger children.
I think it can still apply to some extent. Your example of hanging up the spatula, that's the disadvantage of being the firstborn, I guess. You got to get one first.
Yeah. Got the harder one. My eldest
to make an example.
She got the first one.
So, Tracy, you're in, your business is in Singapore and in the Philippines. Am I correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's it like operating in the two countries? Do you find there are advantages in being in one place as opposed to the other, or disadvantages?
Oh, definitely. I can actually expound on this a little bit more because I actually was living in Cebu in the Philippines for 6 years prior to moving back 3 years ago during the pandemic. So I definitely can see both ends of the spectrum of, being in the Philippines versus living in Singapore. And that comparison has actually made me appreciate Singapore a lot more as well. So for example, when I was registering my company in Singapore, I actually had consulted with some friends regarding this, and they were like, oh, that's easy. Just get this app and these people will help you and you're set up within 6 hours. And I was like, that's it? They're like, yeah. And I got my bank account within 2 business working days. And I registered on GBiz to be able to bid for projects. And that was done within a few hours. And then it's registered on the website within the next few days once they verify your identity and everything. So the convenience of that versus having to queue up for paperwork and waiting for a month to register a company in the Philippines, followed by more queuing for the bank, and then even more queuing for more paperwork, and then permits, and then licensing and everything. I think in total, applying for the business permit in the Philippines was about 1 or 2 months versus a number of like maybe a week in Singapore. So that is something that I'm really grateful for. And then of course, convenience. Like if I want to find jobs and everything, all I have to do is log online, log in with my Sing Pass and I can find jobs, or I can log into other websites. But in the Philippines, it would be a bit more of a different tactic. You would actually need more word of mouth recommendations to actually find more of these jobs. And you would need to, I think you really need to put in a bit more effort to hunt for the job, so to speak.
Have you got any luck with GBiz in terms of getting some business there?
Yes, actually. I'm currently set to work on a project sometime in September with the Asian Civilizations Museum. So hope that goes well.
Okay, very good. Yeah. So that's
Thank you.
using technology to advantage. Richard, when you were doing it with iSearch Worldwide and the other executive search firms that you had, what were the biggest challenges you felt that the applicants had in terms of finding work or operating in the Singapore environment?
Okay. I mean, I have been in business for 27 years, and then I retired the company and shut it down. And I have operations in different parts of Asia as well, about 10 offices in Asia. So they're all different. However, during the time when I started, I was dealing with mid-level management. And then when I migrated to the later half of my business, we dealt only at C-suite executives. So we're a retainer firm, we're doing senior level. So the candidates come from all over the world, not just within Singapore. I think in the past, candidates coming from overseas had an easier life because they are given all the benefits of an expat, and those benefits are essentially gone now. The local has equal opportunity to consider. So it's tougher for overseas people to come in with high cost of living. And particularly, I think last year, the rental cost was just exorbitant. And so I've heard of companies relocating some of their regional executive overseas because it's just too expensive to keep them in Singapore. So I think the high cost of living is driving some businesses away, the high cost of rental, particularly, and high cost of just everything in Singapore. So we have to contend with that as a nation, how to keep the resources against inflation and keep the talent. Because, essentially for us in Singapore, really what we have is brain power. And if we don't have that brain power and the creativity, we can't thrive as a nation, So I think our government has quite a piece of work in front of them to do to attract this talent. At the same time, developing our local talent. Our local talent is coming up now. I think it's quite good because a lot of executives have gone overseas and they're exposed. They are as good as a foreign talent for some categories of it. So they should be given a chance instead of being stereotyped to say everybody from overseas are good. And so I think if we have the local talent marching up to the tune and the foreign talent continue to come and give certain element that they can at a very senior level. And those at senior level, I think companies can afford to house them and provide them all the benefits. But mid-level, I don't think it's necessary. And I think it's essentially going away from us in Singapore.
Yeah, but I mean, there was a report recently about the number of Singaporeans leading $500 million companies in Singapore. Quite a number of them are Singaporeans. Of course, that's in association with the president's the requirement to be a president in Singapore, right? But the increase in talent, I mean, to Pamela and Tracy, do you see potential for you to develop businesses into something very large if you wanted to? Or do you think Singapore is a place where you can do that, or do you feel you've got to do it elsewhere? Pamela, how about you?
So I run an event operations business here in Singapore, and my team is, we're a strong team of 6, and we're dedicated project managers and producers with some designers as well. So for my business, it doesn't make sense for us to scale up to big numbers because firstly, that's also not the direction I want for my business. It's just not what we do. But also, labor costs are phenomenal compared to when, 3 years ago, pre-COVID. Like you have university graduates who have just come out with 0 experience asking for $3,000 paychecks off the bat, and it's just such a different scene from what it was several years ago, where people are actually willing to put in the sweat equity before they earn their stripes and and get to enjoy the fruits of their labors. So what I notice right now also with it's also very difficult to hire foreign talent even if I wanted to. Staff in the Philippines who are amazing designers from Vietnam, great back-end supports for coding and things like that. But even from Malaysia, I have 1 foreigner and Malaysian talent and 1 Filipino, and it was jumping through hoops to get their passes. And for the work that they do, because we're a small company that's growing and we want to pay salaries, but we also are, because of the nature of our business, when you're in the entertainment business as well, it's feast to famine. So you can't just get staff and then hope for the best. You're always planning to make sure that you can pay salaries, and if another, knock on wood, pandemic rolls by, you want to make sure that you're not you're firing, hire to fire, at the end of the day. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind when we're doing this. I don't know, Tracy, what do you think for your side? Because I know a lot of your staff sit in Philippines too.
Yeah, a lot of my staff actually do sit in the Philippines, mostly because, again, I had been there for 6 years, and these are the people that I had worked with and trusted for many, many years to work with me. I think out of everyone here, my company is the youngest by far, because we've only been established for 1 year. By ourselves, we actually decided to set out by ourselves to embark on this journey together. So far, I don't think that we are in a position, of course, to scale up to the level that most other companies might be doing in Singapore. And like Pamela, that's really not our intention at this point in time. Definitely, we will need to look into hiring more people eventually as well, and expanding our reach and our growth in order to address a lot of the changes that are coming in my industry, especially being in the creative and media industry. So we're facing a lot of challenges, I would say, with the higher emergence of AI technology, especially. And then, if we don't upgrade ourselves personally, it doesn't make sense to hire even more people when we can just say, hey, I can do all of this with just one snap of my fingers and just click a button and I can change everything. I think for us, it's better that we upgrade ourselves and continuously learn, and then upgrade the gear that we need to get. So in this sense, being on a smaller scale actually is more efficient for us. And, we're just a small fish in a big pond. So this is how we need to survive first.
Okay, so but would you sort of establish your business, is it in Philippines or in Singapore?
Both.
So it's two separate companies, is it?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I just I noticed that both our panelists, and including myself, we were entrepreneurs, and I'm not sure whether the two ladies have worked in corporate before or GLC, and of course I did my corporate life before I became an entrepreneur, just like you, and you notice that, and I'm pleased to see that among the next generation. I think Singapore need that entrepreneurial spirit. There's a great question by the panelists and by somebody in the audience. They asked, if you don't mind, I just refer to that.
Yeah, sure, let's do that. Yeah,
we can lead to that, because it's about talking about Singaporean lacking creativity, and versus foreigners, maybe less formally educated, and also the question of entrepreneur pushing the boundaries. So I think we in Singapore in the past, my generation, all of us, have, our parents thrive for us was to have a college education. Now everybody have it. In my time, probably 6% of the cohort will have a university degree. Now it's probably 60%. So the amount of graduates coming out is so easily and so abound. However, being educated and being smart is two different things. Okay, so we all have a degree and we all think we're smart, but we're not. We stop thinking. And unfortunately for us in Singapore, I think that part is still can be improved. I think that part about thinking, adjusting, and be entrepreneurial, has to be there. And the two ladies here are pushing boundaries all the time. They are testing the boundaries, which is a great thing we have. And I think if we as a society in Singapore allows that testing of the boundary is good. Instead of in the past, no, it cannot be done, and therefore nobody do it. So I think we start from our generation now. And I was talking to somebody who was a young mother, and it says my 8-year-old son is talking back to me and arguing with me, as if he's the 20-year-old. I say, well, you have no choice. You got to engage him in a conversation. You're no longer able to say, I'm mom and you are my son, do it my way or the highway. It doesn't work anymore. But how do you win them over? So I think I'm glad to see the next generation of Singaporean will be more vocal, more daring and more courageous, which makes them sometimes not so good for certain sector of the industry. You know, certain type of work is not very. It was very good in my generation if you comply. We are a nation of employees. I hope Singapore will be more than just a nation of employees.
Actually, I gotta jump in on that one. So I think something a little bit unique about, for me at least, I do not have a university degree. I don't even have a diploma, if I'm really honest. I completed my O levels and I have an incomplete diploma in legal studies, which I never got around to finishing up. And here I am, and I run a business right now, which we started in the middle of the pandemic. I personally do not hire for paper. I hire for personality as a guideline, because especially when you're in event management, if you do not have a certain type of personality, you would not thrive in the world that we live in, the climate that we live in. And so, you know, I often see, you know, if anyone who has a degree in event management, I'm like, yeah, nah, you paid for this? What's wrong with you? You know, you weren't resourceful enough to figure it out. So, you know, and I've been at the back end of scrutiny where when you're trying to apply for work with corporates, where they look at your job movement. So if you have been with a company for less than 5 years or 3 years, they're like, oh, there's a lot of movement in your resume. But you know, a good employer will look at that and would want to understand from the employee, oh, what did you learn from that, and how did that experience, you know, help you in your next job, in your next journey? Because even working with a company, working at various companies is also an education as well. And I think, you know, people need to appreciate skills and experience over the textbook. And that's what I'm also seeing nowadays. Like, I have designers who are not even done with university right now, not even done with the degrees, and they are producing way better work than some of the designers that we pay a fortune for. And they produce, you know, 10 times better work, and they're more innovative, and they're faster, and they're, you know, superbly efficient. So, you know, again, I think passion over paper is a way that, you know, people like us in our industry, especially at our day and age now, how we drive our businesses and how we drive ourselves. So yeah, Tracy, what do you think?
So the designers that you have that you say are very good, where are they located? In Singapore or elsewhere?
So some of them are in Singapore, yes. Actually, my two designers, one is Filipino and the other one is Malaysian.
Okay, but they're based in Singapore. Okay.
But actually, my Malaysian was based in Malaysia, and then we brought him over to Singapore. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Tracy?
actually a topic. Sorry. That's actually a topic that I hold very close to my heart, regarding the first question regarding creativity for the locals. So before I got involved in the media industry, I was actually in an organization in Singapore called Design Business Chamber Singapore. And this was a company that, an organization, sorry, that actually advocated for design thinking for businesses, as well as advocating for designers to work with business people so that they can prolong their own businesses. Because there has been a statistics that shows that design companies don't last longer than 2 years typically. So the idea was for them to get more familiar with the accounts. You know, you can't just be a creative. You need to think about the business aspect of your work as well. So one of the things that really struck me was when we were starting to open bids, rather the government was starting to open bids for Changi Airport Terminal 4, I believe, 3 or 4 at that time. And what happened was the Singapore Institute of Architects came into our office and they were very angry, and we were like, what's wrong? So they told us that what happened was the CAG wouldn't allow for local architects to bid for the project. They only wanted foreign architects to design the airport terminal. And then when the local architects were like, but we're award winning, we have these many awards, we're recognized internationally, so how do we participate in this? And they were like, no, don't worry, you can help the foreign architects file the paperwork. And that created a huge hoo-ha, and they said, like, this is an outrage, we need to showcase our local talent, we need to show them that we can do better, we are better. So that actually led to the revival of a design festival called Singaplural. And I'm not sure if it's still running at this point in time, but it did run for quite a while. And that actually saw 8 design organizations come together to champion local designs. And I feel like that is really a way to showcase like the community spirit. And then, we showcase our local talents as well. And I think that's really important because we're not necessarily a nation that's just all about books and then reading and everything. We are a creative people as well. And it's just a pity that we're not given a bigger platform to showcase that or get the recognition as well. Because why do we have to travel overseas and be recognized there before we can come back and actually get like, oh, this is a Singapore-born local product. This is, made in Singapore. It doesn't make sense for us to not support ourselves.
Yeah. Do you think there's a lot of stereotyping going on? We've spoken about it earlier. That we are sort of like book smart, but not necessarily street smart. We lack the creativity. I beg to differ because I think I've met a lot of people who are quite creative, quite clever in their own way, and they know how to work the system and use the system to their advantage. Maybe it's time we sort of use another stereotype or do away with the stereotypes and start doing things better on our own. What do you reckon, Richard? Because you've been dealing with this for quite some years in your industry.
Sure. As I said, I'm happy that we see more entrepreneurs in Singapore. They will struggle, and that is the price you pay as an entrepreneur anyway. So, however, starting up a business, your first step is survive and thrive and grow. And I think we have not done enough. We don't have enough of the economic scale to see entrepreneurs really being successful. We don't have the likes of the Elon Musk of the world in Singapore, even close with it, And so it takes time. So it requires both sides of it. One is really the attitudinal side. I want to answer Pamela's question. How do I hire people? What do I look for? Do I look for the degree? And of course, you have not done that way, and that's great. But don't just because of that you think everybody with a college degree is worthless. They have a lot of credibility in them too. But I go beyond that. I look for the 3 A's in a person. Okay, I cannot ask for some anecdotes. So I give you my 3 A's. And the first A is attitude. You look for somebody with the right attitude. And how do you define attitude? I define attitude as grit. I define attitude as just perseverance. The can-do attitude type of person who will not give up easily. So you look for this quality in the person of what they have done in the past, where the attitude is put in question. That means they have big hearts. They will not give up on you. Second, I look for is aptitude, which is intelligence, the smartness. And sometimes the degree is an equation towards that, but it has other form to learn about the intelligence. And as an entrepreneur, as you look for your team, they must continuously learn because the environment changes all the time. So as the environment changes, if the person is not very smart, cannot adapt. Great heart, but no smartness doesn't work. And the ability is the last thing I look for. So companies normally look for experience. I don't, because experience can be acquired. Unless you're in a very specific field that requires experience, you don't. You look for the first 2 A's. The third A would always come along if you find the right person. And of course, when you build your business, you will have to contend with things like loyalty, commitment to the cause. And you will suffer because the smart people with great heart, they will be like you. They want to be like you. And they will start their own business to compete against you. So you contend with that. So now you need the next element of managing a business, managing a team, the human dynamics of it, and learning about people. So you will go from different phases. I wish for Singaporean companies to grow to that embryonic phase of growing to become successful organization. And so you learn. So you can join organization like Entrepreneurs Organization, which I was co-founder many years ago. And you can join them because you can keep on learning. And the whole idea of being a group like this is to keep on learning from one another in the same environment. So I hope that for us, as a Singaporean, as we see more breaking new grounds, this question by the same anonymous attendee is very interesting. Would you dare to break rules to open up new frontiers, right?
Yeah,
Of course, we just don't break rules that get you into jail. That's all. But you're supposed to. I would say break new boundaries. You've got to test the boundaries continuously. Don't take no for an answer. Never take no from a person who cannot give you a yes. Don't take no from a person who cannot give you a yes. So you keep on pushing until you find the person who can give you a yes. That's the decision maker. And that is where you have to push the boundaries. Yeah, but don't do illegal stuff. It's not worth it, right?
Yeah. It's also about sort of breaking out of the safe spot, right? The safe zone that you tend to operate in, right? Pushing the boundaries is one thing, but if I could just get from each of you, how would you define or describe Singapore society? Tracy, how would you describe Singapore society?
Wow, that's a bit of a tough question, actually. I don't know if this might sound a bit off, but I feel like we're kind of disconnected at this point in time. I do feel there is a divide between the generations. And as much as we try to push to use technology as a means of connecting, I do feel we need a few more tangible ways to actually foster this community spirit as well, like what we would describe as a kampong spirit. I don't see very much of that nowadays. I do know that people will go out their way to help each other for sure, but when it comes to like neighborliness and so on and so forth, I think we tend to see a lot more of conflict rather than actually a peaceful way of living together and cohabiting. So I think we can improve on that area.
Okay, the kampong spirit or the lack of.
Lack thereof.
Pamela, how about yourself? How would you define the Singapore society?
Often very entitled.
Okay.
If I'm very honest, when we're dealing with
That's
I
often
mean,
leveled at your generation as well. You guys are the entitled ones.
it's for when I say entitled, it's just that it's almost like everyone's expecting to have the best of everything without putting in the work. Everything has to be on a silver platter, otherwise it's not acceptable. And people forget, like Tracy was pointing out, human decency and kindness. People often forget to be kind in our society. And if you are I'm a service provider, I'm pretty much with the work that we do. And it's often, where we see the ugliest sides of our clients and, of the staff that we work around with, where they take for granted, something as simple as excuse me, please, and thank you. So, and this is just my observation, and yeah, I don't really have too much to say about that.
Okay, no, but okay, that's fair enough. Richard, you've seen a lot more. How would you define Singapore society now, and maybe as a comparison to the past?
Okay, I think Singapore is going through a phase of adolescence. I think we are still trying to find our identity as a nation. We use elements of economic indication and the ranking of the world to say where are we, but we haven't found our core. That's why we are having this struggle. And I hope this struggle is necessary for a society to mature and define themselves. And I think we haven't reached that stage. We should be reaching it not too long in the future. I'm involved in an organization called Honor Singapore, and honor was something that we thrive and hope to have in Singapore. And therefore I use the word gracious society as well, to be honorable. So what do you want Singapore to be known as? If you go out and people look at us and says, what do you want Singapore to be known as? In the past, we were called the national bird, right? We call it, everything is cheap, so we call ourselves the national bird because we go and everything is cheap because it's a strong Singapore dollar. Then we go through a phase where we become a very grumpy lot, and we complain like crazy. It's never satisfied, and everybody want to talk about negatively. Nobody have a positive hope and suggestion. So I hope we'll be honorable. When people look at Singaporean, they will say, all right, they are honest lot, they are honorable people, and hopefully we add that they are gracious people. I did a search on something of Singapore in our pledge, our national pledge, okay? And it was written by our first foreign minister, Rajaratnam. And I mean, the pledge we use today, we the people of Singapore, right? Pledge ourselves, we want the people. And it was a great pledge. But when I researched backward, I noticed that there were 3 words that were missing in the first draft. 3 significant words. There were other things that were taken out. They want to keep it core. And I think that part is necessary now for the second phase of Singapore going forward. We have achieved certain economic standard already. We have been really a multiracial country. But the 3 words that were missing was helping one another. Helping one another. And that was left out. And I think now going forward, we want to be a gracious, honorable society. We should help one another. And that part has to come from young. Among our children, you know, we got to teach them, you know, certain values so that they know the value of helping one another, not just helping ourselves. And if we have that, then it is shown in the corporate world where we can become gracious to one another, and that part will expand. If not, we are very inward looking. It's me, myself, and I. So the goal of ourselves is how do we expand the pie? Instead of saying, I want a bigger percentage of the pie. Just look at that. How can we contribute to the expansion of that pie? The quality of life here, the creativity we have in Singapore, the entrepreneurial drive, the risk taking ability, you know, and helping one another, not just helping ourselves. I hope, and I dream for Singapore.
Cool. There's a question that was sent to me earlier by somebody who couldn't attend. He was asking, what is the future of Singapore if we continue moving at the current rate in terms of higher costs and everything for the next 10 years? So essentially, I guess he's asking, what kind of a place is Singapore going to be in 10 years? How do you see it, Richard?
Well, I think the physical infrastructure part of Singapore is really going in the right direction. We have to allude our decision makers for really the city planning, the urban planning is outstanding. The convenience is unmatched, you know, for what we're having. I think we need a software. We just need to be a gracious society as a people. So Singapore will not be known by fancy building and a beautiful skyline, but the quality and the heart of our people. That we can transcend beyond being multiracial to be multi-gracious.
Okay. Pamela?
Taking back that Singapore is one of the leading economies in Southeast Asia. And, you know, obviously because we have a very well-structured foundations, we've got a thriving economy, and the country itself has made very smart investments around the region. So, you know, I would say Singapore is actually going to be the hub, right? Or if we're not already, we are going to be pretty much the New York City of Southeast Asia. So where we have banking sectors, we have tech sectors, we have also you know, investment sectors thriving at this point. I also understand that, you know, Marina Bay Sands, for instance, they're going through a major redevelopment phase for themselves, where they're actually expanding beyond the current property lines. And one of the initiatives that they're kicking off is, you know, to turn Marina Bay area into an attraction center. So basically to turn into a travel destination, sorry. You know, and when you hear of people with or businesses with these 5 to 6 year plans, 8-year plans, it's pretty exciting where Singapore is going to be position themselves as an entertainment hub for huge ass concerts and, you know, again, conferences and everything. Because our economy is so stable, that's also why for events and for business, you know, Singapore is just that hub to go to. And hopefully, you know, if we stay on this route, we're just going to get even better and better. And not to be cocky, but I mean, if I were to compare my background, if I said that I didn't have an education or like a degree or university education, and if I were living in a third world country, for me to go and work overseas, to work in, to get a visa to work overseas, or even just to travel, I wouldn't have that ability that I have from being a Singaporean. I'm very proud to be Singaporean. I'm absolutely, I'm like, I hold up the flag all the time. And, I would not have what I have today if I was not fortunate enough to be born here and raised in this country. So yeah.
Okay, Tracy, how about yourself? Singapore in 10
Yeah.
years' time?
Well, maybe I'm slightly more pessimistic in this area, but thankfully we still have 10 years to address this. But we do have a rapidly aging population that's coming up. And I do believe that came out in the news where we actually might need more assistance in that area with regards to caregivers, with regards to, I don't think hiring more domestic helpers is really the solution here, but we need to look for something that is going to be better for the community as a whole, because again, where do we end up in 10 years time with people who are rapidly aging, and there's a lot of people who might be disconnected from their families, who are in single households, and they only have themselves to deal and contend with. That's where I think the community building really has to come in much more strongly now. And this can be fostered with the younger generation and the current generation as well, to teach this, to look out for each other, because there have been instances where, when we go out to, like, say, for example, there was one time I was delivering Chinese New Year goods, and we went to this HDB blocks in Boon King, which is for the lower income families. And a lot of the people that reside here are actually the elderly who don't have any more family members or not in contact with them. And at times, because they don't know who else to rely on, or they don't have any connection in regards to technology and with people as well, they do tend to fall into the backwards when it comes to care and concern. And unfortunately, during that time, I did encounter a gentleman that was locked inside his own house. He had no sense of time. He had no sense of the days. And the key to his house was actually broken. So we had to actually call the police, SCDF, and then eventually an ambulance to come and attend to the gentleman because he was quite ill as well. I feel like this could have probably been addressed better if there were actually more people to check in on them as well. So urban planning, I agree with our gentleman here that it is actually doing much better now. We are actually catering to a lot more people who are elderly, who have disabilities, and we are actually transforming the landscape to assist in this area. So that's really one of the things that I'm looking forward to seeing more of.
Great, thanks. That's it's interesting perspectives all around. And just wrapping up, I would say, just going back to what Richard pointed out about helping one another, being in the pledge. Yeah, maybe it's time to do more of that, because I think it's going to be much more difficult now. It's harder to pass on lessons from generation to generation. I think from my parents to me, it was easier, but I think from mine to, say, the newer generations, the changes that have taken place are so drastic. The jobs are almost irrelevant in many respects. So it's a bit harder to then relate to each other. So the more help we can render each other, maybe it would be what's needed for Singapore's soft development. I think the hardware is still sparkling, is bright, is shiny. It still attracts a lot of people, and that will continue to be the case.
And I want the people who are listening in, and including ourselves, that we really need to do our part in a small way. When we help someone, the person who is offering the help benefits because there's certain chemical that is in your brain that tells you it's a good thing, that you're feeling good about it. It is also good for the recipient. When the recipient received help, they felt good too. So 2% are positively contributing to it. But there's a third person that's also contributing to it that will benefit from it. In other words, if there's somebody standing by and see you helping another person, they receive a good feeling and they will continue that exponential path. So I hope for us, we just do our part, be gracious, we be helpful. We're thinking that, hey, we're not impacting enough, right? No, we just do that. And then others will observe you and will see you and then they will do it. And I think we just need to turn that around then to be me, myself, and I, inward looking a little bit. I think we want to just be really a software in our nation would be something to be great for Singaporean, as a whole.
Great, yeah. And I think a lot of that will have to come from the top as well. So let's hope the software improves on that area. So thanks again for being in the session and all the best as we see Singapore develop.